as we've covered these questions this month, I pray that you've taken something away from them each night and each week. And I want to encourage you, if there's ever a topic or a study that you would like to have covered, please let me know. I'm definitely not the master teacher, but we can all learn from the master teacher together. So I highly encourage you, any topic, any question or conversation from Scripture that you would like to cover, I'd be happy to study it, and we can study it together. Our final question in the set of questions from the Master. Can I see the Father? Now, before we talk about that a little bit, I want to talk about this series that we've had on questions. We've had 4 questions so far. The first was, how do I become great? And Jesus' response was in the form of a question. And the response was, well, are you ready to serve? Because that's how you become great. The second question, well, how often do I have to forgive? How often do I have to put up with a brother or sister before I can finally say, I'm done with you? Jesus said, are there limits to forgiveness? How often do you want the Father to forgive you? We looked at the parable of the unforgiving servant. Then last week we covered, again, a very difficult subject. You might have heard my voice catch a little bit because it was near and dear to my heart. Where is Jesus? Does He care when I'm suffering? We may feel like we're going through a storm of life and we think our God is somewhere off asleep. We're not sure where He is. We know He's not here with us. Jesus responded and said, why are you so afraid? Do you not trust me? In fact, we talked about how unlike the God Baal in 1 Kings 18, do you remember his servants, his prophets, they tried day and night to the point of hurting themselves, injuring themselves to please Him, to get His attention. And at the end of the day, when they were finally exhausted and they couldn't do it anymore, there was no noise, no one answered, no one paid attention. But our God pays attention. I'd like to encourage you to come back next week as we're going to start a new series on finding God in a failing world. And we're going to look at the life of Elijah, a man of God, and see how he found trust with God, how he found courage with God, how he found disappointment in God. And we'll talk about when we might feel like we're disappointed with God, how do we respond? Is it God's fault? And then finally, we'll finish by talking about how to find a home with God. And so we're going to look at the life of Elijah, and I encourage you to come back as we do that next week. But here we are, our final question. And it may seem lighthearted to you at first. It may not seem like it makes sense, but bear with me, and I think you'll, toward the end, see where I'm coming from. The final question that these men had for Jesus, can I see the Father? I know that sounds a bit mystical. I want to see the Father. I want to see God. You know, I think of the verse, for we walk by faith and not by sight. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7. But, you know, there are times, I'm just going to be honest with you. I hope you would expect that from me, that a preacher is going to be honest with you. But I want to be honest with you. There are times in my life where I just want to talk to the Father face to face. I know we have prayer, and prayer is a wonderful thing, but I wish I had the opportunity to just look God face to face when I'm going through a difficult time. I want some answers. And I don't mean that in a callous way or in a disrespectful way. I would absolutely be like Job, who would say, I'm undone. Now I've seen, now I understand. What would it be like to have an experience like Job, where God opened up the heavens and showed Job how truly great he was? You know, I think about when times are great, I just want to be able to embrace my Father and let Him know, thank you so much. That's something that we talked about in class this morning, that when we worship God, we're saying thank you. But to be able to tell Him face to face, and I know we'll get there someday in heaven. But I think about these experiences and these times where these men of old were able to have a conversation with God, and they were able to speak, and God spoke back. And don't you just want a direct answer from the voice of God? I don't think it's sinful for us to say that. I think, in fact, it helps us grow to further challenge our way of thinking and further challenge, how do I have this kind of experience? I'm not saying that the Bible is not sufficient. I'm not saying prayer isn't sufficient. I'm just saying that there are sometimes these needs and these desires we have of just saying, I want to see God. It reminds me of a man named Moses, a great prophet. Yet even Moses, although he spoke to God, he spoke to God as a friend. There aren't many people in the Scriptures described as being God's friend, the way that Moses was God's friend. There were times when even though Moses, he went up on the mount, no one else was allowed to go up to where he went. He was able to talk to God directly. God carved out these 10 commandments. There's even a point in Moses' life where he said, "Show me your glory. God, I just want to see you." He said this in the midst of trouble. And I think we can understand. When we back up a little bit, this was in Exodus 33. When we back up a little bit, remember, Moses had been up on the mount with God, and while he was receiving the law, God was beginning this charter with Israel, and He was letting Moses know, how do you remain holy as a nation? How do you be my nation? The people grew tired. They hadn't heard from Moses. In fact, they grew afraid. There's this mountain, and there's like these storms and this thunder, and it's just scary, and Moses wasn't coming back. And so they pressured Aaron. They said, "Hey, Aaron, we want you to make us a God that we can worship, that we can see." Aaron gave in. So they all pitched in together with their jewelry, their gold, made a calf. While Moses was standing in the presence of God, the people were bowing to an idol. And they said, "You're the one that delivered us from Egypt." Wow. So naturally, Moses comes down and he's so angry, he breaks the 10 Commandments. I think there's a lot there to think. Although he broke the tablets, they had already broken the covenant. Man, they already cut out the first 2. But even after he evoked justice, having several killed, in justice's name, God still said, "You know what? I'm going to let you have the promised land, but I'm not going to be in your presence. I can't handle you people. I can't handle how you are. If I was there, I would end up consuming you because you're a stiff-necked people. So although, yes, I'll give you everything I promised you, I can't be around you anymore." Again, I can't imagine. What if God said that to me? He said, "Jason, I'm just tired of you. I'll let you have heaven, but I'm not going to be there." So Moses in Exodus 33, he says, "You know, God, if you're not going to be there, it's not worth us going there. What makes us distinct? What makes us different than all the other nations if the God of heaven is not with us?" God told him, "You know what? I'll be with you. I'll be there." Moses said, "God, just show me your glory." See, Moses was seeking comfort in a troubling time. And that's what I want us to look at tonight. When we're in a troubling time, and even though, yes, we have these promises, we have these divine promises we know will not fail us, and yes, we have this strength from the Spirit, we have the strength from the Word, we have the strength from the Son, strength from the Father. There are times where I don't know about you, but I'm like Moses. I say, "God, just give me some guarantee. Show me your glory, and that'll be enough." We see the same question asked by, at this point, the 11. We use the number the 12 because that's a title, but Judas had already left. The question, "Show me the Father. Will you show me the Father?" Very similar to what Moses said, because if we are Christians, is it worth being a Christian if God is not among us? How do we know that God is among us? So let's begin together. Let's read John chapter 14, the first 8 verses. Most of you know this passage. "Let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions, many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you to myself, that where I am, you may be also. And you know the way to where I am going." Thomas said to him, "Lord, we do not know the way where you are going. How can we know the way?" Jesus said to him, "I am the way, and the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you had known me, you would have known my Father also. From now on you do know him, and you have seen him. And here we are. Philip said to him, Lord, show us the Father, and it is enough for us. Let's look together at some troubled hearts. As we always do, we look at the context, and we see here we have some troubled children. I don't mean physical children, I mean spiritual children. We have some troubled children, these 12. Jesus said, let not your hearts be troubled. Why does Jesus say, don't let your hearts be troubled? I want you to think about what has happened in John 13 leading up to John 14 for Jesus to have to say that. Begin at John 13. We see that these 12 are a bit overwhelmed. First, there's this message of shame. Jesus loved them to the end. I love that phrase. We'll have to study John sometime. But Jesus, knowing His time had come, He loved them to the end, to the uttermost. He then took the form of a servant, took a towel, wrapped it around Himself, washed their feet. And as He washed their feet, Peter, obviously, had to say something. Jesus responded. When He had finished, He said, you need to do the same. So the very first thing that Jesus does is He gives them a little bit of humility. And there's a message of shame. For they were the servants. He was the master. For Him to have to wash their feet meant that they weren't willing to be the servant among each other. Remember, everybody wanted to be great. Then there's a message of betrayal. Imagine if this were a drama on TV. Jesus' spirits. Now, He was the one who was troubled. And He said, one of you is going to betray me. And they began looking around saying, Lord, who's going to betray you? Who? Well, Jesus makes a comment that seems somewhat vague, even to the point where at the end of it, Judas runs out and leaves, and they think, oh, well, maybe he's having to go prepare something. Because Jesus said, whatever you do, do it quickly. Maybe Judas just forgot. Then there's a message of denial. They find out that their own leader, Peter, he's going to deny Jesus. Man, if Peter was going to deny Jesus, who else would deny Jesus when the time came? Because Peter said, I'll give my life for you. Jesus said, no, you won't. Before the morning truly begins, you'll have already denied me 3 times. That's what the rooster crow meant. But more than that, more than the shame and the betrayal and the denial, there was this ever-present theme that Jesus brought back one more time. He was going to leave. When you look at John 13, He said, now the Son of Man glorified, God is glorified in Him. God will glorify Him once more. Little children, yet a little while I am with you. I've told you throughout my ministry, I'm going to have to go and die. Where I'm going, you cannot come. You cannot follow me, verse 36. You'll follow eventually. So imagine being one of the 11 now, and you're around this laid-back dinner, and you're reclined, and you're remembering the Passover, when God passed over the Israelites, and you're about to lose your master. How would you be feeling? One of you is going to betray Him, another one of you is going to deny Him. In the end, you're all going to lose Him. So Jesus begins giving a recipe for a troubled heart. First of all, He gives a command. Let not your heart be troubled. Believe in God. Believe also in me. And depending on your translation, you might have, you believe in God already, believe also in me. It's just a vague understanding in the Greek that could go either way. It could either be saying, you already believe in God, now believe in me. Or it could be saying, you need to believe in God, you need to believe in me. Either way, Jesus once again, as we've noticed in all these questions, Jesus once again brings up trust. In my house are many rooms. We have many mansions in some translations, but the idea is that there is this one big house. But God's adding a wing. God's adding an addition to His home for you. It's not the idea that we're all going to have mansions and then there's going to be a street and then we can go visit each other's mansions. It's that we're going to dwell with God. We're going to be part of His house. You're going to be part of my house. I'm going to be part of your house. We're going to dwell with God together. That's the intimacy, the relationship we're going to have in heaven. Jesus said, now listen, trust me on this. I'm going to build many rooms, many mansions, dwelling places. Then I'm going to come back for you. When I'm finished. He said, I'm preparing a place for you. It's to your benefit that I'm leaving. And the way I leave is through the cross, but that's for you. You don't understand it yet, but that's for you. And there's coming a time when I'm going to come back and I'm going to receive you to myself. I'm not going to send another messenger. I'm not going to send another prophet. I'm going to come get you myself. That where I am, there you may be also. And we read in the book of Hebrews, chapter 9, verse 27, for Christ, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, will appear a second time. Not to deal with sin, but to save those who are eagerly waiting Him. Are you waiting for Christ tonight? Jesus says, I'm going to receive you to myself, that where I am, you may be also. So Jesus begins with this promise, and then He says, you can know the way to where I'm going because you know me. Here's something so amazing about Christianity. We're not left in the dark. We don't have to second guess. We don't have to question. We don't have to doubt. We know the way. We have the understanding. God has laid out the path for us, and in fact, He invites us. He calls us to come. Jesus paved the way through His walk at Calvary. So then we have the questions, and there are these constant interruptions. I can't imagine being Jesus and trying to lay out this divine truth and, oh, Jesus, real quick. Jesus said, you can know the way. Oh, hey, hang on. I don't know the way. Did I miss part of the class? Excuse me, where's the way? There's Thomas. Jesus said, I am the way. Thomas, don't you know me yet? I am the way. I'm the truth. I'm the life. No one goes to the Father except through me. As a matter of fact, if you've seen me, if you've known me, you've known the Father. You've known the Father. And you can see the Father now. Jesus, Lord, I have a question. I have a statement. Can you just show us the Father now? And it'll be enough. I promise it'll be enough. And we can't judge Philip too seriously at this point. We can't be too harsh with any of them, really. But going back to Philip, Philip was always a person who was fervent, and he was always willing to bring people to Jesus. See, Philip was a better disciple than many disciples are today. Here's what I mean. John chapter 1. Philip responds to Jesus. Jesus calls him. You know what Philip does? He goes to Nathanael. He says, I think we found the guy. Jesus of Nazareth. He's the one that the prophets of old spoke about. The law promised. Nathanael's response, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Come on, Philip. Don't waste my time. Now, if we had been Philip, would we have continued to press the point? We'd be like, you know what? You're right. I'm sorry I brought it up. You know what Philip said? He said, I want you to come and see. Let me show you Christ. Later on, there are certain Greeks who came up to Andrew and Philip. And they said, let's see Jesus. We wish to see Jesus. You know what Philip did? He brought him to Jesus. So when we think about this man and he asks this question, we can't be too harsh with him. He's fervently desiring to not only follow Christ, but to lead others to Christ. And Jesus, he's trying to meet Jesus halfway. He says, okay, Jesus, you say you're going to go to this place. You're going to make these dwelling places. You said you are the way, you're the truth, you're the life. You say that through you we've known the Father, and we can only know the Father through you. And now you're saying we can see the Father. Jesus, please just take us to Him. Just let us see Him. I promise it'll be enough. I'll be satisfied. I'll go with you to the end. I'll believe everything you're saying. I just want some guarantees. Maybe that's where you are as a Christian tonight. Maybe you're willing to take the step out of the boat. You just want a few guarantees. Let's look at the answer. This lesson in the series will be yours. Is it so wrong to desire to have a vision like Paul had in Acts 9? Is it so wrong to hear the voice of Christ like Paul did in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, as Willard talked about? What did Jesus say? How did he respond? Well, as he always does, he answered a question with a question. First, he said, "Do you not know me? Have I been with you long, so long, and you still do not know me, Philip? Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, 'Show us the Father'? Do you not believe that I am in the Father and the Father is in me? The words that I say to you, I do not speak on my own authority, but the Father who dwells in me does His works. Believe me that I am in the Father, and the Father is in me, or else believe on the account of the works themselves. Truly, truly, I say to you, whoever believes in me will also do the works that I do, and greater works than those will he do, because I'm going to the Father. Whatever you ask in my name, this I will do, that the Father may be glorified in the Son. If you ask me anything in my name, I will do it." First question. Philip, don't you know me yet? It reminds me of if we went back to John chapter 1, verse 18. At the beginning of John's gospel, John lays out who Jesus was before he was called Jesus. You ever thought about that? Jesus was the Word. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. And we go down to verse 14. The Word became flesh and dwelt among us. We beheld His glory. Then we drop down to verse 18. We read, "No one has ever seen God just the way He truly is." No one has seen God, the only God, who is at the Father's side. He has made Him known. So yes, I have never seen God. And yes, no one in the history of mankind has truly seen God the way He is. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God. You know, the word "with" means face to face with God. If anyone knew God, it was Jesus. Because Jesus was not only face to face, He is God. Jesus, "Philip, you've been with me all these years. Have I not made it clear to you that I'm God? That I and the Father are one?" But then there's this second question, and it's more implied than it is directly stated. Philip said, "Just show us the Father and it'll be enough for us." Jesus said, "When will it be enough for you? When is enough for you, Philip? Think about all that I've done. Think about all that God has done for us tonight. How much more do we need before we'll trust Him?" Jesus created us. He has guided us. He came down into the flesh for us. He taught us. He showed us how to walk. He died for us. He rose from the grave for us. And He's given us these promises that He's going to come again for us. How much more do we need? How much more do we need to just trust in Him? Just a little bit more. Reminds me of the book, if you give a mouse a cookie, what's he going to want? Is he going to be satisfied? No. He wants a glass of milk. You go on and so forth. And then there's a whole series of those books. Moose and Muffin, and I think there's a pig and a pancake somewhere in there. But it's never enough. Can we not just trust in the Father? Trust in His Son. Trust in the Holy Spirit who is guiding us. What about those of us who have not physically seen Jesus? We can say, you know what, sure, I get it. I get it. The 12, they got to see Jesus. They got to walk with Him. They saw His miracles. But what about me? Jesus has already answered that actually in John 20. Do you remember Thomas wasn't with the 12? We call him Doubting Thomas, that poor guy. He didn't know how history would remember him. He just wanted some guarantees too. Well, Jesus told him, "You've seen me and you believe. Blessed are those who have not seen me and believe." I want to close tonight. I want to close this series with a greater promise. Did you know that you're better off today than those 12 were, those 11 were, the night that they were with Jesus? Do you know that? You may not feel that way. You are better tonight than they were at that moment speaking to Jesus face to face, and here's why. Because the great promise Jesus gave in John 14, 15, and 16 has been fulfilled. What do you mean? We have the Spirit. We have the Spirit. Talked about this a little bit, I think, one of the first weeks that Eric and I were here. In the beginning, there was a garden where God and man dwelt. Man sinned. God could no longer dwell with man. Over the next several hundred years, next several thousand years, God spoke to man in dreams, visions. He even spoke to man like Moses, like a friend. But God could not dwell among sin. God came at certain times in certain ways. But then in the latter days, God dwelt with man, so to speak. He walked with man. He hurt with man. He thirsted as a man. But now there's a time where God not only dwells with man, He dwells in man. Jesus said in John chapter 14, I will ask the Father, and He will give you another helper. He will give you another helper. You drop down to John chapter 16, verses 6 through 8. But because I've said these things to you, sorrow has filled your heart. Don't let your heart be troubled. Nevertheless, I tell you the truth, it is to your advantage that I go away. If I do not go away, the Helper will not come to you, but if I go, I will send Him to you. And when He comes, He'll convict the world concerning sin and righteousness and judgment. Drop down to verse 13. When the Spirit of truth comes, He will guide you into all truth. For He will not speak on His own authority, but whatever He hears, He will speak, and He will declare to you the things that are to come. When you back up to verse 12, Jesus said, I had many things I still want to say to you. That's how preachers feel a lot of time. They see the clock, like, man, I had so many more things I wanted to say. There's going to come a time when there won't be this cloud or this haze over your understanding. The Spirit's going to guide you in all truth. Let me tell you, brothers and sisters, we have all truth tonight. We don't have to be concerned. We don't have to be misunderstanding. Just as these 12, they misunderstood just about everything Jesus had to say. Even Jesus is going back to heaven. They said, wait, when's your kingdom going to be restored? Jesus said, just go to Jerusalem. You'll figure it out. Holy Spirit's going to come upon you, and you'll understand. We have a greater promise. We've been bought back. We're now the dwelling place. We're the temple of the Holy Spirit. How blessed we are, and how few realize the blessing we have tonight. Philip says, show us the Father. Jesus said, don't you understand? Don't you see? When is it enough? I'm going to send the Spirit to you. Everything He teaches you will have come from me, and it'll be enough. Jesus has one more question. One more question for you tonight. Do you want to overcome the world? In times of trouble and sorrow, it's hard for us to see the future. Jesus said, I have said these things to you that in me you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation. Jesus didn't pull punches. He didn't sugarcoat anything. He said, in this world you will have tribulation, but take heart. I have overcome the world. As Willard talked about this morning, we are more than conquerors through Him. Do you want to be a conqueror tonight? Conquer your sin, conquer your temptation, conquer your weaknesses. Do you want to be victorious over death? Do you want to live on? Are you willing to do what it takes to be a servant? Are you willing to be like Jesus who forgave beyond the count? Are you willing to trust in Him and not be afraid no matter what storms you're facing? Are you willing, even in those difficult moments when you want to say just a little bit more? Are you willing to understand that we are better off now than they were then with the Spirit? Do you need Christ? We all need Christ, but do you know it? Are you willing to be baptized into Christ for the forgiveness of sins so that the Spirit may dwell in you also, that He may make you holy? If you're a child of God and you have questions and you're not sure what the answers are, or you're struggling with trust, or you're struggling with greatness, you're struggling with humility, you're struggling with forgiveness, you're struggling with Jesus, don't let another minute go in your life just saying, I need a little bit more. Turn everything over to Christ. Turn over your struggles, turn over your heartaches, turn over your doubts. Lay them at His feet, and it'll be enough. If you need anything at all, don't hesitate. Come now while we stand and while we sing.